Welcome back to Farms and Frontlines. I am your host, Max Terzano, and I'm joined as always by Jessica Rudo.
Hey there.
And today, since we're getting closer to the holiday season, we're going to do something a little different and dive into the story of the first Thanksgiving. Jess, I know you put together a neat history of the food involved with the origin and what the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag would have been eating. And I know there's a pretty cool story, the one we've all heard back in like elementary school, where the Pilgrims invited the Indians to a nice Thanksgiving feast, and they said prayers and had a great time, and then everybody went home.
Yeah.
Not exactly how it may have happened, right?
No, not really. Yeah, right. So in the United States, we celebrate Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday of November, and it pays homage back to exactly that story that we've been told in elementary school of the Pilgrims and the Indians coming together over food, taking a break from fighting each other. Everybody was fine. Obviously, it's a little more nuanced than that, and we kind of dove into, a little bit more of that story. Now, I will say right up front, there are a lot of interpretations of the first Thanksgiving, and we just
Mhm.
went down one of these rabbit holes. But how we celebrate today, we are giving thanks, and we come together with friends and family and talk about what we're grateful for and thankful for. And we usually have a huge feast, right? Like my dad always makes a ton of food. I always loved going there for it because I don't like cooking and he is such an awesome cook.
I also love going to your dad's house for
Yeah,
Thanksgiving
I
because
know.
the same reasons. It's just the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always had it's always been good for me, right? Like I always think fondly on Thanksgiving. But that has not always been the case, and the origins of it are not like a feel good story. It starts with the Pilgrims. So the original feast that our current day Thanksgiving looks back on is when the Pilgrims landed on the shores of what is now Plymouth in 1620. They were super unprepared. The reality that they were about to face. There's not like a system in place that they're falling in on. Food is scarce, resources are thin. The winter is unforgiving. Almost half of those settlers die from starvation, illness, exposure. They're not doing well.
Right.
For them, finding food meant survival, and every meal was like life or death stakes. And in that area, the original peoples of the Americas, the Native Americans, are also dealing with tribal politics. And one of the local tribes that the Pilgrims interact with are called the Wampanoags. They spent centuries cultivating the land. They practiced sustainable agriculture, most notably maize or corn, beans, squash, which became later known as the Three Sisters crops.
Mhm.
They are staple to their diet, staple to the culture, and for Native Americans, the tribe, especially the Wampanoags, food was more than sustenance, right? It's tied to the land, it's tied to the seasons, it's tied to the community. So food, in a sense, kind of was like a form of resilience. So to bring us into the origin story, the first Thanksgiving, it's 1621, and it celebrates a feast shared with the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims. The Wampanoags, led by Chief Massasoit, provided the settlers with corn and taught them how to fish and how to grow crops. And in the harvest season of 1621, it's a celebration because one, they made it, they didn't die.
Yeah, they survived.
And then two, they had a bountiful harvest. The story is that there are 4 days of feasts. And the story is also that the Wampanoag were not actually invited.
Yeah. This is like so funny because it's like this is essentially where, they're in Plymouth, Massachusetts, right?
Mhm.
So they're basically just typical Boston fans, and they're excited that they survived the winter, and they're shooting off guns, they're
Yep.
blasting cannons. So the Wampanoag are obviously just like, what the heck? They readied up
Yeah.
a war party and everything to go check it out,
Yep.
and then they're like, oh, it's you guys.
And the pilgrims were
What's
like,
going on?
I mean, you can eat with us if you want. Why don't you sit
Yeah,
down? It
well,
is
you're
kind of
here, I
your
guess.
it is kind of your fault that we can eat well.
Yeah, and it was the Wampanoag, right, with Chief Massasoit, but also someone that we many people who have gone through elementary school in the United States will probably recall Tisquantum or
Mhm.
Squanto, right? And I think it was interesting because when like you're going through elementary school or anything, they teach you to like, yeah, the Indians came over and Squanto was there who knew English and as like a third grade or whatever. I'm not like, why? Why did he know English? You
Yeah,
know,
it
uh,
never dawned on me, well, he didn't just know English, like,
right? Like,
he must have had some interaction with Europeans at some point.
yeah. And so like the Mayflower gets there 1620,
Mhm.
1620, right? And
Yeah.
Squanto actually was sold into slavery years before this to a apparently like a monastery in Spain to these like monks where they taught him different languages and European scholarly topics. I don't know exactly what,
Mhm.
but he learned English. And then when he wouldn't convert, the monks like, just released him, and he made his way back to North America somehow. And he returned in 1619. So he
Mhm.
gets back 1619. Mayflower arrives 1620. He befriends these pilgrims, teaches them how to grow maize, how to grow
Mhm.
crops. Thanks to him and the Wampanoag, they have this successful harvest, and then they decide, hey, we survived the winter. Let's be obnoxious, shoot our guns and cannons. And then the
Yeah.
Wampanoag show up, and they're like, "You guys okay?" They're like, "Oh yeah, want to eat?"
Yeah, and, the Wampanoag are encouraged to interact with the Pilgrims because they're hoping to have an ally in their intertribal wars that are happening.
Right? Yeah,
With the Mayflower also comes disease, so a lot of tribes, including the Wampanoag, are really hit hard by this
yeah.
disease. They actually call it the Great Dying. Um,
Well, I guess that's pretty succinct.
I know, right? And then, so they're hoping that kind of the enemy of the enemy is my friend will work
Right?
out here,
Yeah,
which it doesn't. But
yeah,
they don't know that. But you brought up the date 1619, and I just thought, when we were talking about this, I thought that was interesting. There's the whole 1619 project,
hmm,
which is talking about African American slavery in North America, more specifically like United States area. Latin America is going to start a lot earlier. But it's interesting that Squanto comes back from being freed from being an enslaved person in 1619. So I thought that was interesting.
it's a pretty
Because
wild story too. Like
yeah,
where
yeah.
you get captured into slavery, they're like, "You must convert." He's like, "No," and they're like, "Oh, okay, goodbye, I guess." Like, huh? I
Yeah.
mean, great, good. I'm happy it worked out that way, but that's not the typical slavery story, you know?
So he escapes to London. The Catholic friars help him get to London, and
Hmm,
he lived with John Slaney. He's a Newfoundland company treasurer. And Newfoundland company colonized Newfoundland.
that makes sense. They sound nicer than the East India Company,
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Dutch East India Company. I'm sure they're not though.
right?
But he uses that connection to get on a ship and get over to Newfoundland, and then makes his way back to the Massachusetts area.
Man, can you imagine doing that? Like the whole area, like you cross the ocean twice, being just like
Yeah,
a Native American who's like, "What the heck is all this?" And then they drop you off in like Newfoundland. And he's like, "Well, I
yeah.
guess I gotta go home." It's not like he's like, "Hey Google,
He's
write me a map. Give me directions to."
MapQuest. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Like
printed them out.
it's just like, okay, I gotta go find the Wampanoag now. Where am I? Yeah, props to him, but he gets back, and the rest is
Yeah.
quite literally history from there.
So there's a historian, Linda Jeffers Coombs, says Squanto is one of only two members that were previously enslaved that make their way back.
Hmm. Wow.
I know, it's crazy, and
And I believe you did talk about
it's in the millions. Like they think it's estimated between 2 and 5 million indigenous people are enslaved between 1492 and then 1880.
wow.
Um, but I wonder though if that's only two of the Wampanoag tribe ever make it back.
Yeah,
But
that's
whatever.
interesting.
Yeah. Either way.
I know when Squanto finally did come back, his original like tribe, like
Hmm.
sub tribe of the Wampanoag, had been essentially wiped out from disease,
Hmm.
and that's when he went and joined. Like he just found them, and Chief Massasoit was like, "Yeah, come on in.
Come on in.
Yeah, come on in. We're going to a big Thanksgiving feast."
No. Do you like turkey?
Speaking of turkey, I know it's the first Thanksgiving probably didn't look exactly like what we know as Thanksgiving today.
Yeah. So things that we associate today with Thanksgiving: turkey, cranberries, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. Probably little to none of that was at the first Thanksgiving, I found accounts that they had seal, lobster, swans.
Oh my gosh.
Which today, if you told somebody you're going to eat a swan, I don't know. Maybe people would be fine with it, but I'm like, that's gross.
I don't know. Yeah, if I was like, if I came home for Thanksgiving, my mom was like, "We've got the swan here, we've got the seal over there." I'd be like, what is wrong with you? Where did you even get this? You don't
I know.
sell that at ShopRite.
You
I
can
think you're a
imagine,
wanted
like,
criminal now.
I know, like, we need to report you to the police now that you've had seal.
Oh,
But
where did you even
anyway,
get one? Yeah.
yeah, some of the, well, let's see, where are we at even? I feel like we've already gone way off the rails from our outline. All right, let's see. So obviously, things that were had during this first Thanksgiving are going to be maize, corn, which we still have today in the United States. The three sisters, like we talked about, things that
Hmm.
just were harvested and did well. Turkeys, though, I thought were really interesting. So turkeys might have been at that first Thanksgiving. Spanish traders first came in contact with turkeys in North America in probably like the 1500s. And they brought them back to Europe. I love that Columbian exchange, like things that have origins back to Latin America.
Hmm.
In parts of Asia, so they see turkeys. The bird's name comes from the shipping route that passed through the country of Turkey on its way to Europe.
So they didn't have a name for it until they like got to Turkey. They're just like, I don't know, we got these big birds in America.
I don't know what it was
Should we
originally
call them
called,
something? Like,
but
well, we're going through
the
Turkey, so I guess.
bird that passed through Turkey so much, they ended up just calling turkey. Like, what is this? Came from Turkey. All right, turkey. Cool.
It's so creative.
Yeah, I know. I love it.
Nailed it. Next.
Yeah. So when settlers arrived in America in the 1600s, they were super surprised to find turkeys, and they really enjoyed how they tasted because they were eating a diet of like cashews and walnuts and other like native nuts. Ben Franklin wanted to call the turkey the national bird instead of the eagle, citing it was genuinely an American bird.
I mean, I guess that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah,
The bald eagle's definitely more intimidating, but
yeah. I wonder
turkey's American.
if turkey became the American bird, do you think we would eat it for Thanksgiving?
I don't know. Could you
I
imagine it's like bald eagle instead?
I don't know. Can you imagine though if it was like, I am now ingesting freedom via this turkey?
This turkey. It's a very nationalistic holiday now. The
I eat.
Philadelphia turkeys would have words.
Yeah. So another thing, corn originated in the lowlands of southwest and central Mexico, roughly like 7 to 10,000 years ago. Believed to be a human invention because it does not like naturally occur in the sense how we can like eat it and digest it.
Hmm.
Indigenous farmers began selectively breeding a wild grass called, oh boy,
Yeah.
teosinte, Teosinte.
Teosinte?
Teosinte. Yeah, I guess that's better, right? They chose like select kernels that got bigger over time, which starch, they could easily digest. And then Columbus brought that corn back to Europe. Before that, corn was only found in the Americas.
That's pretty cool.
I know. And then cranberries, another thing associated with Thanksgiving, not found naturally congealed in a can. Cranberries are native to the swamps and bogs of northeastern North America.
That's pretty
So are they
cool.
around you? Are they around? Yeah, right?
Yeah, we got cranberry
Yeah, New
bogs up
Hampshire.
here.
I was going to say probably a bunch
Hmm.
up there.
Yep.
Native American tribes ate cranberries. They used them in medicine. They used them to dye clothing, and they were a part of this original energy bar, which I talked about in a previous podcast
Yeah.
called pemmican,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
basically like nuts and cranberries and like basically what is that called when you dry it out?
Yeah. Like jerky.
Yeah, like turkey. Yeah, God,
Yep.
like stuffed into like animal intestines, and then so they could take it on the go and eat it.
Delicious.
I know. The Pilgrims named this fruit craneberry because the flowers reminded them of like the bird crane, a crane head.
Mm.
I was reading, I'm like, they didn't have cranes. Like
Yeah.
construction.
You hear the pilgrims setting up their little wood huts.
Hmm. I'm like, I'm not that dumb.
I'm a professor, damn it.
Yeah. But what I thought was really interesting when I was looking into like the history of Thanksgiving, and I don't mean to like minimize, Thanksgiving is also known as like a day of mourning in the indigenous community
Hmm.
because it's kind of like really washing over like the genocide that happened because
Yep.
of, Manifest Destiny and this the
Yep.
colonization of the Americas. So I'm not trying to minimize that at all.
Right. No.
That is definitely a thing. But I was interested in how we came to like how we celebrate Thanksgiving now.
Right.
Because I made the assumption that it was just always a call back to, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoags getting together to eat after a good harvest.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's so much more to it.
yeah, which I thought was really interesting. The first one that I could find was George Washington saying he asked Congress to pass a day of public Thanksgiving, and that's in quotes, calling upon Americans to express their gratitude for a happy conclusion of the Revolutionary War. So this he asked for it. He proclaims it on October 3rd, 1789. And then the day is Thursday, November 26th, 1789.
Which is interesting because this one, like the first official day of public Thanksgiving by
Mhm.
with George Washington, has nothing to do with the Pilgrims or the Native Americans.
Right. It's just saying, like, we are grateful for this military victory, that I want a day where the nation comes together to celebrate it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, like, okay, when does Thanksgiving become the Thanksgiving, right? Where we call it back. John Adams and James Madison also declare a Thanksgiving holiday. But it's the same thing, right? And it's not a reoccurring thing. It's just a day
Right.
of giving thanks. It's not until Abraham Lincoln in 1863, so the height of the Civil War, makes it a holiday after the victory of Gettysburg as a way to express the gratitude for this pivotal Union Army victory.
So
He
again,
makes
like another
Yeah.
military victory.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he again makes that proclamation on October 3rd, the same day as George Washington. I wonder if he did that on purpose. If so, good for him for knowing his history.
Right. I guess it wasn't so far removed, but it was just 15 presidents before him rather than the 46 we have now.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. But still,
Still, props, Abe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, history.
Woo!
I know. And then, right, so it's for a military victory, and there's nothing about Plymouth, there's nothing about Native Americans. He's just asked everyone to give praise to God for the land that gives a healthy bounty. Thanksgiving is celebrated on the last Thursday of November ever since, except in 1939, the last Thursday in November fell on the last day of the month. And Franklin D. Roosevelt was concerned that that would shorten the Christmas shopping holiday.
Of course.
In 1939,
We see commercialism already rearing its
yeah,
ugly head.
but he's thinking like, economic recovery, the economy needs as many people out
That
spending
makes
their
sense.
revenue as possible. So he moves it to the second to last Thursday in November, which becomes known as Franksgiving.
If I ever do like a Friendsgiving, like with
Yeah.
friends before the original Thanksgiving, I'm totally going to be like, Happy Franksgiving, everyone.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So then, not surprisingly, states are like, no.
Yeah, no,
So
we're not doing that.
no, you can't. We've gone too far in this tradition. No, we're not doing it. So 32 states issue a similar proclamation, and then 16 states refuse it and say, no, the last Thursday of the month is Thanksgiving, and you, as the president, can't change my mind.
It reminds
So
me of
for
that
two,
like scene from The Incredibles where it's like, math is math.
that's
Thanksgiving
right.
is Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
No.
that's right. So for 2 years, 2 days were celebrated. The president and part of the nation celebrated on the second to last Thanksgiving, the second to last Thursday, and the rest of the country celebrated the following week. And then to end it all in 1941, because, World War II wasn't enough,
Right.
Congress sets the official date for Thanksgiving as the fourth Thursday of November. Now, I bring this up because if Congress can fix when the actual official day of Thanksgiving is, why can't they get their stuff together and fix daylight savings?
Right? Like, let's go.
Nobody likes it. Nobody's a fan of it.
I
Get
have
rid
yet
of
to
it.
meet one person who's just
Yeah,
like,
I know.
yes,
Yeah,
love daylight
exactly.
saving. This is the best. So excited.
So,
But there's a lot of cool history right there, like just straight up American
yeah.
history with like history of Thanksgiving that I'd never heard of before we started digging into this.
Yeah, and one other person that I would like to bring up, and Max, if you want to talk a little bit more about her, is the mother of
Yes.
Thanksgiving, the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb, Sarah Hale.
Yeah, this is actually super cool. This woman is a badass. I mean, I'd never heard of her before. Again, just showing the lacking in the Thanksgiving education department in our elementary schools. She was a really cool woman, and I was like rehearsing this in my head earlier, and I kept
Hmm.
saying Sarah Jessica Parker. I'm like, that's not right. She is not the mother of Thanksgiving. So it's Sarah Josepha Hale, and this woman was extremely excited about Thanksgiving. She really loved the idea of Thanksgiving, like way before it was actually a holiday. Hale was a New England born poet. She was
Hmm.
an editor, an activist, philanthropist, and as you said, she wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb, which originally was called Mary's Lamb, but the name changed over time. She would often refer to herself as a lady editor, but she was very passionate about women's rights, which this was way before the suffragettes and all that kind of stuff. She was just hardworking, and she had written a novel. It was called Northwood, or Life North and South, showing the true character of both. And it was kind of an anti-slavery critique, which was, I imagine, pretty bold for
Yeah,
like a woman to be writing a book at the time,
1800s. Yeah.
criticizing like common practice, you know.
Yeah.
And then she accepted a position as editor of the journal Ladies Magazine, which was later renamed Godey's Ladies Book. And
My-
this is pretty cool. She held her post as editor for 50 years until her retirement at the age of 89. Like
Crazy.
that's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
So she regularly wrote and published articles and editorials discussing the benefits of women's education and all of that kind of stuff. And she actually played a key role in founding Vassar College, which was just the second degree granting institution of higher education for women in the United States at the time, which I thought was really, really cool. That's
Yeah, that's awesome.
what a badass. And she
Yeah.
also, one of the other cool things before we get into her ties to Thanksgiving, just talking about how cool she was really interested in preserving American history and honoring the nation's founding principles. She used a women's fair to raise funds necessary to complete the Bunker Hill Monument in Boston, which
Yeah, that's
is
awesome.
super cool, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. And she engaged with her readers to help preserve Mount Vernon, George Washington's home. And by doing these things with the Bunker Hill Monument and George Washington's home, Mount Vernon, she helped kind of destroy stereotypes about what women could accomplish through philanthropy.
Which is a deal because women doing philanthropy work is going to be the baseline to build off of for women's rights. Because at the time, it's kind of frowned upon for anything, any kind of money making work outside of the home, any
Right.
kind of, employment, it's frowned upon. So this is like the loophole that women find to show that women can add to society in a different way. Does that make
And I
sense? You know what I
mean,
mean? Yeah. It's
yeah,
just, which
absolutely.
is, it's really important for like women's rights later. So it's really awesome to hear this.
I mean, like, if you're talking about Sarah Hale in terms of today, it's like, okay, she was an editor and she gave to charitable causes. Cool. But, like, this is in the 1800s, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's doing things that were kind of unheard of. She was an editor for a ladies'
Yeah.
journal for
Yeah.
50 years. She helped
Mm-hmm.
preserve these awesome monuments that we still have today. So it's super cool.
Yeah,
And these
absolutely.
things kind of led her, these interests and campaigns for public good. They tied in with her decades long campaign to establish a national day of Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving celebrations were kind of like sporadic throughout the colonies when she was growing up, and it became popular in New England where she was born and raised.
Mhm.
She felt that it should be a national celebration and that it would help unify families who had been geographically separated as the country expanded quickly, which is
Mhm.
kind of wild to me. Her idea was like, we need a national day of Thanksgiving, so no matter like how far apart families are, we can still know we're celebrating today and giving thanks and having a feast no matter where we are and all that, which is
Yeah.
kind of the opposite of what we do now, right? It's like everybody gets back together and has a
Yeah, we
feast.
fly all over the place. Yeah, right,
Exactly,
right.
yeah. So obviously in her time they weren't flying back, as I think, I don't know, but but the country was expanding at a rapid rate, so it was her idea in her mind. We could have this national day of Thanksgiving, everybody would celebrate and be quote unquote together, right? And so beginning in 1846, in her magazine and different personal letters, she started writing to different presidents. She petitioned James K. Polk, Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan. It says at the time they all received appeals from Hale, who by that time was a well-established editress of Godey's Ladies' Book. And it wasn't until 1863 when Hale finally found a sympathetic ear in the White House, which was, as you mentioned, President Abraham Lincoln. And she wrote, "Permit me, as editress of the Ladies' Book, to request a few minutes of your precious time, while laying before you a subject of deep interest to myself and, as I trust, even to the President of our Republic of some importance. This subject is to have the day of our annual Thanksgiving made a national and fixed Union festival." Again, I think it's pretty interesting wording, how she calls it a Union festival.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm like, that's very smart wording. Like, right, knowing your audience. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So she was clearly an intelligent woman.
Yeah.
And only 5 days later, President Lincoln did as Hale requested and issued a proclamation to establish a national day of Thanksgiving each year on the last Thursday of November, so the American people could celebrate grace and good fortune with one heart and one voice. And several years later, Congress passed legislation making Thanksgiving a national holiday. And then, we would eventually get to Franksgiving,
yes,
which was short-lived but quite exciting at the same time.
She's really the one that kind of brings it back to the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag, right? Like this original Thanksgiving. Isn't it coming from her?
It was Hale.
Ha!
Yep, it was Hale. In her campaign to establish Thanksgiving, she drew upon the story of the 1621 Harvest Feast. Yeah. While this story was only one part of the broader narrative, it became a focal point as it represented themes of cooperation and gratitude, fitting Hale's goal of unity and peace.
And she's from New England, so it makes sense.
Exactly. So she grew up hearing about that and studying that. It says in the early 20th century, this narrative was further solidified through educational materials as schools taught Thanksgiving as an emphasis on Pilgrims and Native Americans peacefully coming together. Over time,
in the early 20th century?
Yeah, that's just
okay. That lines up with the parade. Yeah,
that's Sarah Josepha Hale. I think she's a pretty cool part of American history that I'd never heard of before, which is a shame.
Yeah, but I'm glad we got to give her a little bit of a voice here.
I know. I'd love to learn more about her because I think she's just an incredibly fascinating person and did a lot of really good work that was outside of the scope of what a woman was kind of allowed to do at the time.
Yeah,
but she petitioned the president and was persistent about it until it actually became a thing. It's thanks to her that it's a national holiday.
I wonder if after she got it only took Lincoln 5 days, if she was like, "Oh, right, yeah,"
because every other president just ignored her.
Yeah, I wonder if she had all these rebuttals ready to go, and she's like, "Oh,
yeah, all right, sweet." Probably. I would have loved to see the Godey's Ladies' Book article. I did it.
Yeah. Yeah, right afterwards. Hooray!
Yeah. Celebration article.
Yeah. Mm.
So that's Thanksgiving in a nutshell.
Yeah. Learning stuff we didn't know.
I think it's pretty cool because it ties to you get the cool, interesting facts about the Wampanoag not necessarily being invited, but just hearing gunfire and being like, "Whoa, what's going on? We got to go check that out."
What's more American than that?
Right? Just shooting guns in the air. Heck yeah. We did. Yeah. And then you get the different presidents going through their versions of it, how they're tied to different military victories. You get this awesome woman, Sarah Josepha Hale, her cool story and just passion for a national day of Thanksgiving to unite the country, which is admirable goal.
Yeah. And then we have these dishes that we associate with Thanksgiving that do have ties to Native America, which I think is cool too.
Seals and swans.
Oh.
Oh, right. No. I do think it's pretty cool.
Corn and cranberries.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool that when you're sitting down for Thanksgiving, look at the food and the spread before you. You can think some of this stuff was what was present at that quote unquote first Thanksgiving. And that's pretty cool.
Wherever you are, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, we wish you a happy holiday, a day of thanks. We're thankful for you, our listeners.
Amen.
And those that contribute. Yeah, we hope you have a good, safe holiday. And reach out to us if you have anything you want to add for your Thanksgiving celebrations. Or your Franksgiving. Ooh, what are you doing for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, what are you doing for Franksgiving this year?
Yeah.
Well, we hope you all enjoyed this episode. As a Franksgiving gift to us, please follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and sign up for our newsletter. And we are extremely grateful to all of you who follow and listen and support us in any way, shape, or form. A huge thank you to everyone around the world who's listening and supporting us. We truly, truly appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you later.